funding prior to the year end, so we kind of guess what the number is. And then Community Foundation is extremely flexible and guesses along with us and provides that funding out to nonprofits. This council wanted to hear more about that process of, going through the grant process. There was also some communication at the last council meeting from Councilmember Nacarado and someone who I didn't catch because I was online, wanted to hear more about the funding that we give them and potentially changing the dollar amount. So as you may or may not remember, we proposed $50,000 in the 2026 budget. And Betsy and I had met to discuss that as well and what that might do to the grant program. So Betsy with Community Foundation is here to talk about the grant program and answer your questions.
Thanks, Betsy. Thank you so much for having me. So I really appreciate this opportunity. Many of you, we've gone through a grant process together, so I feel like, you understand it, but then I realize, you're not always seeing the full picture of the grants program and, going back to even why we're doing the grants program and the vision for the grants program was really helpful for me as somebody that works in this every day to think about, what are the overarching goals here? And so I hope that this presentation gives you a little bit more clarity and offers a little bit of historical and some information to help you make your decisions going forward. So the partnership vision, so the partnership between the Community Foundation and the City of Salida is really, our goal is to steward the City of Salida tax dollars to invest in critical, high-impact projects that increase the vibrancy and resilience of Salida. And that can be hard to quantify. Anyone that has gone through a grant process knows it's really hard to look at all these, 40 different applications and decide which one of those is the highest impact, which one of those are really going to increase the vibrancy of the city. And I always appreciate the people that go through that process with us. We're big believers in that process, and we do think that it has come up, as you'll see later, it was some pretty accurate results of how the city dollars have been invested. The mission of a community grants program, I think that's a good question to answer, is why do municipalities do community grants? Is it to feel good? But I think it's a little bit deeper than that. And so you are using your community grant dollars to create a healthy and stable community by investing in upstream solutions. And that upstream solutions address the root causes of community issues, so poverty, poor health, crime, before they get to the more expensive having to deal with poverty, health, and crime, which can be very expensive problems to fix in a community. So I wanted to spend a little bit of time on what upstream solutions mean, because if you're a rafter, I'm sure that means something a little bit different. But it's kind of the same idea that it's much more cost-effective to address something before it becomes a problem. So if you think about every dollar given to, say, the Boys and Girls Club, which is always a high recipient of grant dollars from the City of Salida, is keeping kids in a safe space. They're giving them developmental skills so that they're avoiding things like drug addiction, they're avoiding getting into petty crime, versus the cost, which I'm sure you'll hear a little bit later from the co-responder program, the cost of an arrest, the cost of getting somebody that has been engaged in the criminal justice system back on track is a lot more expensive. And so from really not just the heart feel good, this is better for a kid's future, from the cost effective standpoint of managing the city's resources, it makes a lot of sense to invest in those upstream solutions as much as you can with balance with the other competing priorities to help prevent more costly problems down the road. Another example is childcare. So having a child in childcare that allows a parent to work is much less expensive than paying for helping a family get into a home once they've reached that point of not being able to maintain a job and being homeless. And so not only is it better for the families, but it's also better for the city to avoid some of those problems. That doesn't mean we give all the money to community grants and not to law enforcement. That is not what I'm trying to say at all. We definitely need both, because this is definitely a long-term investment, not an immediate investment. Any questions? Am I allowed to open for questions?
Yeah, absolutely.
Any questions about that concept of upstream solutions and why we do community grants?
It's the same as preventative care with medicine. Mm-hmm. You can take your vitamins now or get your heart replaced later or whatever.
Great example. Anybody else? So I wanted to talk a little bit about the process of what community grants, the whole cycle of it. And this is my very awkward graph that I came up with, so bear with my graphics. But it really is a cycle because it starts, you might say it starts up here with city council approves the funds for the grants, but really every step feeds into the next step. So while they're applying for grants, we're providing technical support to applicants. We're helping them learn about what it takes to apply for a grant, what a budget should look like, where to find your Colorado Secretary of State, charitable registration, all these pieces that they are gonna need for every grant process that they do. We then convene a volunteer review committee, which always has a city representative on it, as well as residents of Salida. And they're able to help prioritize based on immediate issues and concerns in the community. And so when we do that qualitative and quantitative review to recommend awards, it really is a pretty intensive process. I'm sure those who have been through it know. You're scoring, you're discussing, you're asking follow-up questions. It's not just who's a good grant writer that we can give money to, it's who's really having that high impact project that's really advancing a critical issue in the community. And there's probably a lot shorter and less intensive way of doing it, but we really believe in that process, and we found it to be, really to over time has withstood that test and been continued to make really good recommendations of how to invest these dollars, whether it's from Salida or BV or the county or private dollars that are coming to us. We then present those recommendations to City Council for approval. I don't know that we've ever had City Council make a change to the recommendations, but you could. It's always, your ability to direct those funds. And then we track those. So we make sure that we're keeping tabs on what were those dollars used for? Were they being used for what they said they were? Were there any dollars left over? If an organization, for whatever reason, folds in the meantime, what happens to those grant dollars? So there's a pretty big level there of what's happening with those dollars after that recommendation is made. And then we always provide individual assistance on grant writing. So anyone that is declined a grant, we always sit down with. We often look at the grant narrative, provide, even copy editing suggestions to it to make them more competitive on the next round. And that not only helps for them being able to apply here locally, which is sort of a closed system, but they are then able to use those dollars to go out and leverage federal, state, and regional private funder dollars to bring into our community. So this, the multiplier effect of doing this community grants process is not just about the dollar amount that you allocate, but the overall health of the community and what we're able to bring in here. Any questions on the process?
And more of an observation. So there's some of us that are sitting here that were involved in this before we contracted with you to come in. And so we have painful recollections of how unscientific our process was. So we don't question because we really appreciate and take a lot of comfort in all the thought and science that goes into the decision making. So thank you.
Well, you're welcome. All right, so I did want to give a little bit of history. This is only the data that I had access to, but this is from 2017 to 2026 projected is what the grant making has been from the city of Salida. You can see I put some notes on there. So we were formed in 2018 and we provided grant making service starting in 2020 to the city of Salida. And that dollar amount my understanding has reflected 1% of tax revenues historically, but I don't actually have confirmation of that. That's just what I've been told since before I came here.
It's generally that, which is, yeah. Yeah, in 2022. And it's, sales tax proceeds to the general fund, Amy, so there's a little bit of a nuance with it, but generally speaking, yes.
And so just, I like to look at, statistics. So the average grant funding over 9 years per year has been about $63,000. And I do want to stress, we are not fair weather friends. We're not upset if the dollar amount is lower this year or less than the 1%. We are here to administer the dollars invested in the community grants program to the best of our ability. And we always hope that, in years when you're not in such a budget crunch year, that maybe that can go back up to that 1%. But we're not going to hold a grudge because it was reduced a little bit. We understand there's really big financial constraints on really everyone right now. So one of the things, this was actually really fun to look into, is those impact categories. Now, I do want to qualify, this is not a perfect representation. We have many organizations like Garna, for example, that is hitting on youth, education, environmental, public spaces. So many programs would fall into multiple categories, but we tried to do our best to sort of categorize each one. And was pretty interesting to see that, since the time that we've been partnering, there's been almost 500,000 invested through 182 individual grants. 60% of that has gone to these top 4 categories. And I found this really interesting because this does align fairly well with the city plan of what you are trying to prioritize in the development of the city. So youth development, that always feels like a really high priority for those reasons we just discussed earlier. And so 12 organizations that offer structured youth development approach as some sort of curriculum. So that's Boys and Girls Clubs, child care centers, school-based education programs. It's not necessarily youth recreation that we sort of categorize separately. So that has been traditionally the highest one that dollars have gone to. The next one is housing. It was curious because only 2 organizations have been funded through the Salida community grants, and that is kind of because we haven't had too many housing organizations until recently when I would say Places to Age came on, but you might consider them more of a health and human service due to their mission. So these have gone to Chafee Hospitality and Chafee Housing Trust traditionally. Both of those always fare very well in the grants process. And then 7% has gone to trails and open spaces. So these are groups like Salida Mountain Trails, Garna, that they are bringing access to open spaces or maintaining open spaces, which are really, in my mind, connect back to an economic driver for the city because people are coming here to use our trails and access our open spaces. Any questions on those top tier categories? No? Okay, so the next tier makes up about 30% is, these 6 listed categories. So arts, environment, human services, social justice, transportation, and community events. So that's things, I believe there was a grant previously for a parade, for I think the fireworks display was applied for a grant before, and then KHEN, we put them into community there. And I do think that oftentimes when we look at those programs that are falling into that previous category, those are often expensive programs. So youth development, housing, food security providers, and open spaces, those are pretty robust programs that have a longevity here that are really bringing in really highly sustainable programs that are doing a lot for the community. And so they tend to have bigger budgets, they tend to make bigger asks, which makes sense in my mind. Whereas if you look at a lot of our arts organizations, they're smaller organizations, their budgets are much smaller, and so comparatively, they're still getting a decent amount of funding compared to that. And then environment, human services, social justice really is full circle restorative justice. Transportation is Mountain Valley Transit. And then I think we talked about the other ones.
Hey, Betsy, you mentioned that the city parade and fireworks previously have been grant funded. Mm-hmm. Thank you.
Yep. And then the last 10% has covered the categories listed here. So animal welfare, health, heritage, mental health, older adults. And I think that older adults category might be higher in future. It's just Places to Age got started recently. And so that's where we see those dollars are going to. There was a COVID-related funding contribution, recreation, so sports, a lot of youth programs apply for funding. But, comparatively, even though they do, regularly get awarded, they're not asking for as much as some of these more, pillars of the community programs. And then workforce development. So I generally tend to advocate for folks that are trying to have a high impact grant program to not overly qualify it. Unless you're for whatever reason are connected to a certain cause or issue, is because it does prevent you from responding to emergent issues. It does stifle a little bit of innovation in that we're not just seeing at what is out there in the community and what we can fund that's high impact. It's you start allocating based on those criteria, not necessarily the level of the impact of the program. Of course, if that is a direction that city council would like to go in, we absolutely do administer programs that do have more qualifiers to them. But given sort of at least my understanding of the goal of the Salida Community Grants Fund is I would advocate for keeping that open because it does allow that broad support. And I think in practice, we've been able to see that it is going to really those high city priority items. And I think that that is something that we would like to include in our reports going forward when we present those recommendations, is what that breakdown of categories look like, so that you can kind of monitor if this is still meeting your intentions for the program.
Cool.
Any other questions?
No, it was fascinating. Thanks so much for those, showing us where the money's been going. Because I've been one of the advocates for having more direction from the city council. But it looks like the committee is landing exactly where we want them to land. And very good point about innovation. Leave some room in there for new creations.
So, yeah, I guess I'm not really clear on what you mean by overqualify. Do you mean just putting any more restrictions on it than what we have currently?
Yeah, so some grant programs are like, well, we want to fund, youth, environment, and heritage. And so then we're able to, accept applications for those 3 areas, which is certainly a good strategy. But just, I guess, in my understanding of the goals of the community grants program, at least as it has been, it would seem like it would be more effective to leave that open-ended and allow, projects that are in need of funds and that can be evaluated based on their impact alone, as opposed to trying to restrict it to certain categories of funding.
Gotcha. So, yeah, I guess in my thinking in asking you to come this evening, as we're having budget discussions, is, well, number one, just to see if we can find anything more in the budget to give. And what I'm really concerned about is these upstream services that are going to be hit so hard in the coming months. We know that SNAP benefits are jeopardized right now, and folks can give separately to the Community Foundation to help with that because of the government shutdown. So that's a pretty urgent need, but I think we're about to see a whole lot more urgent needs because of what's happening with cuts in mental health, housing and food security. And so I just, as one of my kind of parting thoughts for this council and those who serve on that grants committee, is just to have this conversation about what, we don't have to start a child care program. As the city of Salida, we can support child care programs that exist through these funds. We can support our existing transit agency through these funds, and, city of Salida may be involved in its own transit agency at some point, but we're not yet, so we can support those greatly needed upstream services for our community as things get really tight for everybody, and especially those nonprofits that have really small budgets, which doesn't allow for a lot of resilience.
I do have to say, the funding landscape is a little bleak right now. If you're looking at the full availability of funds, not just on the federal level, but even locally. METAB, the Marijuana Excise Tax Board, used to be a really great source for youth programs, educational programs, and that really does not exist anymore due to the vacancy at the facility. And so that's a big hit for the community for funding, and a lot of organizations have been adjusting to not having that cycle this year. And then, of course, everybody's budgets are tight this year as we see changes going on locally and at the national level as well. We're also seeing at the Community Foundation, we're getting applications from organizations we've never received applications from before. And that's what we've been hearing from many other funders, is just becoming more competitive in that funding landscape. And so, every dollar that can be available for our nonprofit communities, I think is well spent. But I do understand that, when you're looking to remove $2 million from a budget, there are cuts everywhere.
And what are you seeing from the other municipalities as far as reductions and contribution?
BV has not, they seem to be stable at the 1% that they're gonna contribute. Their 1% is a little smaller than your 1%, but, still that's admirable. And then, we are in talks with Pancha about potentially joining into a community grants program, but we're not quite there yet.
So it sounds like you understand how budgets work. And we are definitely in a budget crunch. So I appreciate that understanding. So I have two questions. And I think I've asked this last year, but it's always nice to put it out there again. Number one, what are your other fundraisers? And number two, how do you select your grants committee?
Yeah, so the grants committee, so typically what we do for the grants committee, I'll take that one first, is we put together a proposal that we put in front of city council for you to approve, and that outlines the makeup of the committee. Once we combined BV and Salida into one process, which is very appreciated by our nonprofit partners, because they don't have to apply twice, it's half the work. They're able to be more efficient with their time and focus on their programs, not their grant writing. Then the committee had, I believe it is a city council member, two residents of Salida, BV trustee, two residents of BV, and then I think a committee member from the Community Foundation's board as well. And so it's a time commitment. So we rarely have people chomping at the bit to sign up for it. A lot of times it's convincing people. They're like, oh, I want to get more involved in my community. I'm like, I got a job for you. And so I wouldn't say it's necessarily been competitive in the past. And so it's more of just somebody that is willing to do the work and follow the process.
Right, and I know it's work because I was there. Lots of hours of reading and follow-up, not just reading, so I understand that part. Yeah.
As far as other fundraisers, so the Community Foundation manages, I think it's 28 funds, maybe 29 now.
Right.
Where we are managing essentially other people's money. And so we have a fund for childcare that is funded through the lodging tax at the county level. And so that is funding specifically to help expand childcare spots. There's, we talked about the BV program. We have donor advised funds. So that's where somebody is donating typically a larger amount for whatever reason. They have a larger amount to give. Maybe they sold a property or came into some inheritance, and then they administer it slowly over time. So we administer those funds as well. This year we contracted with the county to administer the Common Ground funds, which is a 1.8 million annual fund to invest in agricultural, environmental, and recreation. So there's that program as well. So we do manage a lot of different funds. I do really appreciate that Salida's and BV's funds have generally been unrestricted for our nonprofit organizations. They're not project-based, and that really pays for those less sexy items that organizations need. The copier, the electricity bill, things that are essential to doing the work. It's really hard to, do a program if you don't have a copier or you don't have power. And so helping to plug those holes in the funding landscape is really helpful. Did that answer your question?
Yes.
Hey, Betsy, it was 5 years ago, we did that challenge grant with COVID. And we were able to leverage, I think, a city match. We committed to $25,000 and we levered that into over $500,000. I wonder, and we'd obviously have to talk about the budget, if there was not that much money, but let's say it was $10,000, if we were able to come up with that and do it a community challenge match like we did last time, that could possibly get us to a place far beyond what our limited budget will get us to. And I mean, there's a lot of people in this community that these causes are near and dear to them. I don't know what other people think, but it might be worth a shot because it worked so well 5 years ago.
Yeah, I think that's a great idea. I mean, I certainly want to find more money for the community grants because I feel like they're needed now more than ever. But I've also seen the budget.
How does that work? I don't remember. I mean, I remember it.
So the way it worked was the city committed to matching in that instance, the first $25,000 of money donated to the emergency relief fund. And so with our commitment of $25,000, the county, the schools, a lot of different entities stepped up and it was over $500,000. So it's a conversation to have on the budget side, but maybe with a lesser amount with a match. Maybe it's possible, I don't know, but it might be worth a conversation.
Betsy and I can absolutely meet to talk about that.
Yeah, absolutely. And we are going into the quarter four is typically the highest individual giving time of the year. And so it would be timely to push that out quickly. If we were not able to get the details confirmed, until like mid-December, that may be a missed opportunity. But, I think absolutely. And people do want to give. We do have a community grants fund that people give to that we could definitely offer that match opportunity.
Yeah, if the council wants to do that, we can Betsy and I can get together and then bring something back to council.
Yes, let's do that.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Thanks so much, Betsy. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Absolutely.
Appreciate it. Okay, and next up, we have the co-responder program.
Right, so Councilmember Dominique again asked that we bring this forward. So I think it's important to know that first and foremost, the city of Salida, the town of Buena Vista, town of Poncha Springs, and Chaffey County are still in negotiations with the MOU to bring forward the co-responder program. So nothing has been signed, nothing has been finalized or confirmed. The co-responder program was initially housed in Sol Vista for a number of years. You're aware that Sol Vista runs the RAC. Yep, the RAC. Here in Salida. They funded that program 100% through a grant from the state and potentially other sources. The city of Salida wasn't ever a funder of that program. The program itself has a couple of approaches to responding to needs in a community. There's a primary response model where law enforcement and behavioral health specialists ride together for the entire shift. Then when a call comes in, they're with each other and can respond at that time. The second model is where they come to a scene separately after a behavioral health specialist is requested to come to the scene by the law enforcement officer. So earlier this year, the co-responder program was defunded from Sol Vista. The state had decided that they wanted to fund law enforcement agencies instead of behavioral health agencies, which might be an entirely different conversation to have, but that's where we are. So the Chaffey County Sheriff's Office applied for funding and intended to take the program on. They received a grant to fund the program in the amount of about $301,000. So during discussions of transitioning the program from Sol Vista to the Chaffey County Sheriff's Office, city staff spoke with the other law enforcement agencies, discussed the value of the program, wanting to keep it in the community. Working with behavioral health specialists has been a huge value to us. We have used them a number of times on calls. The city, prior to finalizing the budget or bringing at least a draft final, had talked about a potential contribution to the program of between $25,000 and $50,000. The county developed the program and sent a draft MOU to me, the city administrator, and indicated our contribution of the program at a little over $120,000. Amy Tahanovich and I met with the finance director and county manager at the time, Don Reimer, to discuss our current budget realities, asking what kind of contribution would be sufficient to ensure the city was still participating in the program, and just kind of talking about timing for budget requests and the importance of getting things to us in a timely fashion so that we could fully bring it to our council. So slightly begrudgingly, they were like, yeah, if $25,000 is what the city has available, then that will work for us. Again, we're still negotiating the MOU. The county has hired a number of co-responders and they've really stood up the program. So far, honestly, without any financial contribution in 2025 from the city of Salida. Gave you some calls to understand more of kind of how the city of Salida and the police, how often we utilize the co-responder program. So for the approximately 90 days from July 1st to September 30th of this year, there were 13 calls that were flagged as mental health calls for services by the dispatch office. After those calls, were taken, and after the event, we had a chance to go back and look to see if they were categorized properly. 5 of the 13 were not categorizable as mental health, so they were routine calls. So someone is trespassing on property, or they won't leave somewhere, and so an officer is called to take care of that situation. Of the 8 remaining calls, 7 were handled entirely by the responding officer, and no behavioral health specialist was needed at that time. 1 was deemed appropriate for an on-scene co-response responder to deal with a patient. So we definitely use the service here. We value the service here and want to continue working with Chaffey County and the other law enforcement agencies to ensure that our community is taken care of with this program. And if there are, the MOU will come to City Council for your final approval once all of the entities, it's shockingly fun to get 4 entities on the same page with one program. So that will definitely come forward to you all. Just wanted to give a little context for kind of where we are in the process right now. And there is $25,000 in the draft budget for your consideration.
Christy, my question is, if we were able to give more, what difference would it make in the program? Because this doesn't tell me anything about when this is offered. Is this offered like from 1 to 2 o'clock in the afternoon?
No, it is. So it'll be set up on a countywide basis, and there'll be one co-responder with a deputy that will respond, Monday through Friday, 8 to 5 kind of thing.
So it's set up for the county to have a co-responder on Sunday through 7 days a week, basically. On Wednesdays, they'll have training, so it's only available for 4 hours on Wednesday, and then the rest of the week, it's available from 10 a.m. to 10 p.m. Unless the co-responder is somewhere else in Nathrop or Buena Vista. And we still always have access to Sol Vista's crisis team, which can respond and show up at any time at 0 cost to us.
In your experience, when do most mental, events happen?
Most of
Because
them
they
are in the middle of the day, mid-afternoon, when
Interesting.
people are out.
Or at council meetings.
It could happen
Too,
there. But no, most of them are during the middle of the afternoon.
Is that right? Interesting. I
There's
would've
more
thought
people
that-
out and about during that time of the day
Okay.
and more people to see things to call in.
Okay.
So
All right,
with our
good to know.
$25,000 contribution, it's fully funded. As of now, with the county, we're.
Yes, they've
contributing,
agreed to fund the program.
And it is fully funded, okay.
It is.
My impression is that it could be more fully funded if we, as a city, were able to give more. But I think the reason, my understanding for some of the reasons behind that is it could actually save the city money. So some of the evidence from other co-responder programs, which there's quite a few throughout the state, is that a jail diversion is about like a cost of $15,000. So even with those small numbers given on the council action form, which I don't want to argue those numbers because I feel like Chief Johnson, your numbers, but that's a cost savings of like $60,000 if we assume jail diversion for those 4.5 mental health calls. There's also an ER diversion cost savings, which doesn't affect the city of Salida directly, but it's like a $10,000 cost savings, so that's significant as well. And I think we need to think about that investment a bit harder. That's why I asked to speak about it again, and the potential cost savings to the city, as well as, you know, just for me personally, I can think of people in my own life who would have been significantly helpful for to have that co-responder along, saying, these are your mental health options. When meeting up with the police, I know that the police have training in mental health topics, but you're not mental health professionals. So I think there's also an excellent opportunity to gather significant data about the county. And I don't want to pit the police station against what could be the cost savings of the police station, but it doesn't feel right to me, as a council member sitting up here, to invest that much in the police station without really knowing what those line items are, and investing so little in the co-responder program. But I do want to give Chief Johnson the chance to, you know, if you are able to prepare a bit more for my question tonight that I asked previously, and what are those super important line items in the police station budget? And is there some wiggle room there?
Yeah, on the police station, the line items were really building walls and office space. There are a couple of things that are in the budget that probably will be pulled out just because we're not going to meet budget with them in there. I did meet with the architect this morning and with a possible builder just to get an idea of some cost of some items. There's no frills in there. It's pretty much walls, desks, some interview equipment, and an evidence room. There's nothing other than basic building needs in there. I will point out on, if we average out the co-response calls over the 90 days that we've had since Sylvista stopped, and we take that out over a year's time, at $25, we will average about $1,156 per time that we use co-response. That's just what the numbers work out to the current call volume. It's about one time we use them every 16 days currently.
You said 16 or 60?
16, one every 16 days.
And my feeling is that we don't really know if we could be using them more if we don't have them to use, and if we haven't invested in that.
Are there statistics from any other, instead of trying to reinvent the wheel, I'm wondering if there's statistics from any place else that has already invested more into this before we put more into it, and if it's making a difference. Do you know?
I don't
know
have
that's a
like
big
call
question.
volume statistics. I'll give you two examples. One, Sylvista works with Canyon City. They too don't have the program anymore. So they obtained a $200,000 grant, and they're running their program on $200,000. So utilizing the grant dollars and not expanding another $450,000 on top of the grant money. The town of Pittsburgh, large community, they're doing away with co-response and going a different route. So there's two sides to the coin there.
I have a little bit of data from, I think it's from the Colorado Office of Behavioral Health, that the sheriff's department had, our Chaffey County Sheriff's Department had 141 contacts with a co-responder riding along. And that's just 7% compared to the state average of 2%. So it just doesn't seem like we're using this as fully as we could. And again, it goes back to those upstream services that we talked about previously and the importance of those and investing in our community that way, with what we know people are dealing with, that's becoming quite urgent in the community.
Yeah, I agree with Councilmember Nacarado that, like these services and that we provide, I would be interested to see what the co-responder program can do with the money that we can give them. And if we're able to get it up to their requesting, or what they're requesting at 125,000, I think that would be great. I think the investment into mental health and something that Betsy touched on too, and Councilmember Nacarado just said, the upstream solutions, preventing, poverty, poor health, and crime. The job of a city is to provide public works and public safety. And I think investing into these kinds of programs, similar to the Community Foundation as well, those nonprofits that are there, the investments that we do are intended to be preventative and proactive. And I really think that this kind of partnership with the co-responder program is something that is wise for us to invest into.
So I've got a question, it's something that's, I'm a bit troubled by, and I agree and I see the value in a co-responder program, but if the county came to us and said, gave us a number between 25 and 50, and then came back with a figure over $100,000, that to me is not an optimal partnership arrangement. That's really concerning to me. It kind of feels like a bait and switch.
Is it not because of the lack of grant funding they
Right.
were able to get, right?
Or was there somewhat of a scramble when Sol Vista lost their funding?
Well, they got the 300, but then in the thing, it says 25 to 50, and now they're coming back.
I agree with you that we need that kind of partnership, what you
Yeah.
just described, and we didn't get it in this case, and I'd hate to lose out on this particular program because of that. I'm sure that the county is listening. I hope that they're paying attention to that, that it doesn't feel good to have a bait and switch, and there's honestly nothing I can think of that's more important for collaborating on than this.
And certainly it wouldn't be our first time funding what other organizations like in the SRO program failed to do. We certainly pick up the slack in that.
I think it's, difficult to think about what the county commissioners were thinking when they said, yeah, we'll take the 25, that's fine. Maybe this isn't a priority to them. That doesn't mean it shouldn't be a priority to us.
Yeah, it's the words could be sufficient. It's a little weak. I don't even know what that means.
Yeah.
I go back to where they say they received a grant fund program in the amount of $301,000. Christy, in your discussions, are they saying it's still fully funded? Or is that still to be determined in the agreement, the multi-use agreement? Or how is that going?
I believe the budget for their program now is a little over $730,000 is what they've identified. They've already hired everyone and are paying them.
And they're.
So, they seem to have identified that they have the money for the program because they've hired everyone. I hear the conversation, and I too do not want the community to lose out on any of these important services. We will continue to negotiate with the Chaffey County to ensure that the city receives the co-responder program when we need it, when we call for it, because that is still the case. We haven't been denied a co-responder in our community because we haven't paid enough. When we would not have a co-responder in the community is when they're somewhere else and they literally cannot come to Salida. So I will continue to work with the county to ensure that the program will maintain in the city. And if tomorrow during budget, if the council wants us to reevaluate how much money we're putting into the program, we can do that. As I said, the budget that's coming to you tomorrow has the $25,000 in it, so we can I won't be able to complete the negotiations with the county tomorrow. They're in transitions as well. I will try really, really hard, but I have a couple other things that I might have to go to tomorrow. But we've had these conversations, and at no time has the county said, you'll only get $25,000 worth of services if that's what you're providing. So I do hear how important this is, and we are not saying that it's not at all.
So for the 2026 budget, the 25,000 is in there, and then maybe we can talk about the 2027 budget if
And
you
it looks
don't
like
get
their grant
negotiations.
is, their year grant is state fiscal year, which is from, July 1st, 2025 to June 30th, 2026. So they'll need to apply for additional funding, for the next year. So we could reevaluate in the middle of the year, and if the sales tax comes in higher and we have an opportunity to put additional funding in there, we could come back with a budget amendment.
That's a great idea, and I think the most important thing is to know that you heard us, and it's not just me, but it seems like a lot of the rest
Absolutely.
of council, that it is very important that we participate in this program.
Absolutely. It's important to me as well, so, and our police.
Good.
Okay, Cool.
Thanks,
thank you.
appreciate it.
Great. So you can see that the council chambers is set up a little bit differently tonight. We are going to have a actual work session. Really excited. So, I think Catherine, are you presenting to start off with, and then you're going to split people up, or are we going to go? Excellent. Okay, so we are dividing council up. There are 3.
You know, like, go ahead.
Perfect, so find a friend. And you can leave your computers there, we just need your brains.
We don't need a pen?
Just need your brains. So this won't be like online normally, like it normally is, because you're gonna be sitting at individual tables, so.
What, we don't have like headsets
You
with
do,
the
I know,
microphones,
maybe,
you know?
that's what's missing from the budget, is headsets. So, yes, council,
once a year work
mayor, Ben, everybody, find a table.
There you go.
Oh, yeah. And you'll get instructions at your table. Oh, Catherine, are you going through the presentation while people are sitting? What are you doing?
Yes, because we're gonna have some activities where you're discussing during the
I'll
presentation.
sit, I've already done this. You go.
And so divide evenly if possible.
Thank you.
Should I stop the Zoom though?
Yeah. I think so.
Okay.
Does anybody want?
Bill?